went through the chapter and broke it up into chewable, bite-sized chunks. So this week, like I said, last week we looked at one world government and one world financing. This week we'll look at one world religion. And then, whoops, where'd it go? I went right past it. And today we'll stop on, what is that, 286? 206, because I get my zeros and my eights mixed up. And then the next week, we'll go through the seals, the 7 seals. And then after the 7 seals, I believe it's the 7 trumpets, which is on 214. So we're going to have to, like I said, kind of chew this chapter up in pieces because it was rather a long chapter. I want to make sure that we're understanding what we're going through. Now, in this section, we're going to talk about a one world religion. It will be an amalgamation, if you will, of all the world's religions. They'll all come together under one banner of faith, we'll call it, just for a lack of a better term. And I'm trying to think of how you want to describe it. Everybody will worship the same thing. Higher power. Yeah, I'm trying to think of, because it's not God that they're actually worshiping. And there will be very little to no room for Jesus. He will not be the way, the truth, and the life. He might be one way if that's the way you want to practice it, but for you it's, Hinduism, and for you it's Buddha, and for you it's, Muhammad. But it's all going to be, awesome because everybody's going to get along. There will be no more tension in the world anymore because there will be no more world division. There might be no religion. So once that happens, it'll be just like utopia and everything will be awesome. That's how they're going to sell that pack of lies, because that's exactly what it is. Yeah, go ahead.
We have people on television now that say they worship a higher power and they never mention God.
Never mention who that is or what, or any kind of doctrinal statement or anything. I don't know if you guys ever noticed, I'm on the road a lot, so I notice a lot of things. And have you ever noticed that coexist bumper sticker? It has all the religious symbols, different religious symbols, and it spells out coexist. This is exactly what we're talking about right here in today's section. It's exactly what it is. It's coexisting. A lot of times when I see those bumpers, I think, I hope that they're ignorant to the fact that they're praying for the Antichrist. That's what is coming. And that's the only way that the world's religions are going to come together. And as we go through this, the key passage that they look at, and we touch on several times in here, is Revelation 17. And John calls the church to remember it and picture it. It's called Mystery Babylon, the great, the mother of harlots, and the abomination of the earth. In verse 5 then it says, or John says, tells us that she has committed fornication with the kings of the earth, clothed in purple and scarlet, and adorned herself with gold, precious stones, and pearls. She has also held up the cup of the abomination of filthiness of her fornication. As we break this down, we're going to see that this is a rather large religious organization. This is a very wealthy organization. And verse 4, and as we go down through here, you see that verse 3 tells us that she rides on the scarlet beast. That means the scarlet beast is the red dragon. That's the Antichrist. So for the first 3.5 years of the tribulation, she is riding. And the church is always referred to as she. All faith systems are she's. That's just how the Bible has set it up. That, how do I want to describe it? She's in charge of the Antichrist to a degree, or has such high influence as to be able to persuade the Antichrist and the government, because it also says here that she is over and in charge of the 10 kings, and these 10 kings get really upset about it. But it takes the first 3.5 years of the tribulation for that part to happen. describes this one world religion as being, like I said, in the first half of the tribulation. It has control over the kings, has rule over the Antichrist, and she is referred to as a harlot. The reason it's for a harlot, we'll get into that in just a little bit as we go along here. There's a reason for it. But after 3.5 years, that church will be violently overthrown. As we see from the passage just above it, it says, and the 10 kings, the 10 horns which you saw on the beast, these will hate the harlot. They will make her desolate. They will make her naked. They will eat her flesh, and they will burn her with fire. The 10 kings get tired of the rule or influence of this harlot church. So what happens is they overthrow her. They dismantle, destroy, to the point that says that they eat her flesh. For me, when I read that, I see that it's not that they're physically eating the church. What I see is the government kicking in the front doors of every church, that type of church in that period, and taking everything that they want. Now, let's assume that that's not really brass, that's really gold. Let's assume that our sound system's worth something to them, the TV, the monitors. They come in and they take everything. They strip her of all of her assets. Burn her with fire. Throwing a torch in the building. Molotov cocktails, flamethrowers, whatever. They burn it up and they make it completely desolate. And it's interesting that the time frame of this, because at the midpoint, the 3.5 year point of the tribulation, this apostate church, this one world religion, comes to an end right at the middle point. Something else also happens right at the middle point. The middle point, the Antichrist will stand in the temple, make a sacrifice to himself, and declare himself to be God. So the two things happen simultaneously or within maybe weeks or a month of each other. The religious system is done away with, and the new one should be, like, say, a third one, if you will, because we have the one that is the church now, the one that will happen, the one world religion, and then the Antichrist religion happens after that. He takes over and becomes the object of worship, declaring himself to be God. So these two things are going to happen right simultaneously, or what I said, within pretty close proximity to each other, that they'll do away with worshiping whatever God you want to worship, and then you'll have to worship the Antichrist. And from there, it will progress to even get even worse for those that are on the earth. But for this point, we're just going to concentrate on this one world religion. Every false religion in the world can be traced back to Babylon. Besides building the tower, that is the source and the beginning point of all, except Christianity and Judaism, all the world religions. Hinduism, Buddhism, Taoism, Gaia worship. You guys know what Gaia worship is? It's really popular, believe it or not. It's earth worship. Mother Earth worship. I mean, we've all heard that. I mean, it's real prevalent. As a matter of fact, with this one, they have their climate 10 commandments, if you will, and it travels around the country. Seriously, it's in an ark, and they promote this whole, to make the planet better, we need to pretty much be in control of everything, and then we need to get rid of a bunch of people, because if we don't get rid of a bunch of people, because the people are the problem, and that's what's wrong with the planet, it's people. Yeah, it's pretty interesting. A lot of the other cultic systems, not cultic, yeah, make sure I say it right, not Celtic, cultic systems are also summed up and come from Babylon. Taoism, oh my goodness. I'm trying to remember how that one works. I can't remember which one that was. I remember Hindu and Buddha, and it's similar to it. It's like Confucianism. Yeah, it's one that's similar. That's more of an Eastern religion, but we can't really say Eastern because it's spread around the world, and it's here as well. A lot of these Eastern ones really are. And as you see there at the bottom of the page, it talks about how these false religions break the first 4 commandments. And they don't just break them a little bit, they break them directly and blatantly. First one, you shall not have no other gods before me. You shall not make any graven images, nor shall you worship or serve them. You do not take the Lord's name in vain, and remember the Sabbath and keep it holy. These 4 commandments are broken in every one of these religions. Every pagan religion, every false religion, they break these 10 commandments, or the first 4 of these commandments. And a lot of times in these, they don't call these graven images or idols or images. They call them aids to worship. I mean, you guys ever heard of the healing powers of crystals? There's an aid to worship. Babylon is referred to and considered to be the mother of all false religions. And if Babylon is where that seat was, and as we go along here, then Judaism, or Jerusalem, is the mother of true faith in regards to Judaism, and I said Judaism, Jerusalem in regards to Judaism and Christianity, and then it refers to Rome. If Rome is what it is, then it's the mixing of the religions. And as we go along here, we'll get into a nice little history lesson as to how, right around the 4th century, paganism and, oh my goodness, mythology were mixed together. I was thinking mysticism, and I meant mythology, how they got mixed, and it was mixed by Constantine. Satan moved his headquarters from Babylon to Rome. Then Constantine had a vision of some sort, made a profession of faith, made Christianity legal in the 4th century. There's actually no real proof that he became Christian. There's actually no real hard evidence other than the vision he had. He was going into battle and he saw a cross in the sky and decided that Christianity must be the true faith. So he made a profession of faith and decided he was going to make it legal. He won the battle, so then God must be all powerful. That's kind of how it happened. So what he done was, and I said, what we're going to read here is in the tour books of Rome. The Greek divinities, Athena, she became Minerva. Ares became Mars. Aphrodite became Venus. Apollo actually retained his name. So all the Greek mythology became Roman mythology. And the Temple of Isis, which is straight from Babylon, as it says, because Isis is part of the original Babylonian deities, as well as an Egyptian god, all these things that were there in Rome at that time. What they done was gave all those temples to the church, and then the church, if you will, I'm using this term very loosely at that time, took over these temples, and basically they just chiseled the names off the bottom and inscribed new names on the bottom of these shrines and these temples and these statuaries, if you will. So that actually, well, we think, I mean, that's great. Christianity got made legal. What ended up happening was it started to mix with paganism. And a lot of things that are practiced and considered church historically and something we've always done actually has very pagan roots. Gradually, these pagan practices wormed its way into Christianity, which included things that are still done today, prayers for the dead, making the sign of the cross, worshiping saints and angels, instituting the Mass. You may think, well, that doesn't seem so bad. They just got to go to church. If a Catholic doesn't go to church, they're condemned. It's a holy right just showing up. That makes you holy because you showed up. And if you don't show up, then you're not holy. So consequently, you're done. And the worship of Mary. Actually, the worship of Mary has progressed exponentially over the last few years. Last, say, 15, 20 years. And actually, even praying to Mary and praying in Mary's name. Yeah, I think it touches in on here a little bit when Ratzenberger was still Pope. A lot of these practices and teachings continued and increased. Like St. Augusta, you guys may have heard. Have you guys ever done much Bible history? Okay, St. Augusta was a brilliant man, to be honest. And he was really into the Eastern mysticisms and eventually came to Christianity. And what he took was, he was classically taught in Greek rhetoric, in Greek psychology, in Greek philosophy. So what he ended up doing was he blended man's wisdom and God's wisdom, further paving the way for more paganism in the early church. He spiritualized Scripture, meaning that God said, therefore it was. It was God said, but it's really just a symbol of what God meant. I know that doesn't seem like a whole lot, but that little bit waters down Scripture. And once Scripture starts getting watered down, then God has no authority, the Bible has no authority. And if there is no authority, then we are susceptible to any wave that comes along. And from there, the church progressed. Like I said, it became more pagan. And they took the Bible away from masses, although the masses never really had it. But they did originally. They took the Bible away, they locked it up in monasteries, and decided that the general public was too dumb to understand God's Word. And then the church progressed that way for almost 1,000 years, if not more. It hadn't been until we get to the age of the Reformers. We had the Dark Ages after Rome fell. The Bible was locked up. And then we get to the Reformers' age time, the pre-Protestant Reformers, which would be Wycliffe and Tyndale. And these guys were murdered for trying to get the Bible to the masses, trying to get the Bible back to people. And in that system, prior to the Reformation, it was a beautiful system to keep people under control and to keep them right where you want them. The Reformation was brought on, as we know, by these gentlemen first, and then eventually Luther and Calvin. There were other splinter groups that came along that helped, if you will, start the Protestant Reformation. The primary goal, I guess would be to bring the Scripture back into focus. The term for it is sola scriptura, which is basically Latin for Scriptures alone. That's it. And that was their primary focus of the Reformation. By this time, though, the church had got, I'm going to use Catholic as C, small c, not big C, but small c, that which means church in general, had gotten to the point that they were selling indulgences, that they started teaching the doctrine of purgatory, and started teaching that you could pray to Mary. And indulgence is an interesting little concept. Susan, I know you're a sinner, but if you buy this holy bookmark, you'll never be condemned for your sin. Now give me 3 denarii. That's how an indulgent works. And then she hangs on to this for the rest of her life, thinking that she is free from sin. Now, I know you're on oxygen. And no, neither you. Or it would take advantage of, you got a health issue with your asthma and your oxygen. Give me 5 denarii and I will give you this and you'll be healed. Now, we think televangelists are the ones that made this up. That's really not true. This has been going on back in the 15th and 16th centuries. And the church became very, very wealthy off those things. If they needed to raise money, they would take these fake icons around on a tour. You know, this is the thumb of Peter. These are the nails that nailed Jesus to the cross. Those nails were lost to history, but they'll take them around now. And you would pay, it would get the population to pay massive amounts of money to go do it, to go see it. During those dark ages, any group that stood up against the church at that time were martyred. Wycliffe, Tyndale, all these guys got martyred, plus all their groups that were with them. It's estimated that over 40 million people were killed during this period of time for their faith.
Still gets into penance now, doesn't it? I mean,
What's that?
isn't penance sort of that?
Yeah, that leans towards the works-based of it, because instead of being forgiven, which we're going to talk about in the sermon today, you have to do something to earn your forgiveness. And if you do the right thing often enough, then you are forgiven. So it takes away all aspects of grace and replaces it with legalism. And that's effective because people want to think they earned it, even though we can't earn grace. Then it goes into a little history of France and the St. Bartholomew Square massacre, where 40,000 Christians were killed in one day. 4 million Huguenots were killed, which today we would consider them evangelic Christians, which is what we are. So 40,000 people like us, 4 million were killed, just that one time. But overall, during this time frame, it refers to over 40 million people were killed for not submitting and obeying to the church. And the church and the government are pretty much one thing. They argued and fought about who was going to actually rule, but it was pretty much the same thing. And it's from this time frame that the French skeptics and the German rationalism came together and gave us what we call today secular humanism, because they were so upset. Now, jump up, we're going to jump forward to, say, around the 90s, late 80s. And, 86. Actually, I had the date in there. Sorry, I forgot the date was in there. And 86-ish, right along in there, there's been a lot of talk and effort as to uniting the Catholic Church and the Protestant churches. Eventually that will happen. But at this point, I don't see it happening because there's still too many that hold to the doctrines of the Protestant church, vehemently hold to it, and would not bow to a saint, because the saints are just us. And I know that's hard for some to understand and take in, but they were just regular people. Back in 86, some of us are old enough to remember that there was a religious conference held in which over 130 religious leaders of the world from, who all they have here? Muslims and Buddhists. You can't, that's not one religion. You can't say the whole word, it's two different things. Hindus, pantheists. You guys know what pantheism is, don't you? Pantheism is God is everywhere in all things. It's kind of like Gaia worship. Dalai Lama and a host of others. All these who reject Christ were brought together by Pope John Paul II to pray for world peace. Now, how can such a summit take place when none of them believe that Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life, and that he is the source of peace? But yet they pray to a multitude of different so-called deists or deities to bring about world peace. And since 1986, you guys, I suppose you all know, world peace hasn't happened yet, so it's kind of ineffective. It was effective in that it brought all these world religions together in one place at one time for a specific purpose, which if it happens once, then it becomes more common, and it happens more often, and then it becomes more acceptable, and then you get to where we are today, and a lot of religious universalists believe that all roads lead to heaven, and that rationalism is to the point where, Jesus may be your answer, maybe not his answer, but you're both still good and you're all going to heaven, sort of thinking. And it goes into some of the things that Ratzinger done when he became Pope Benedict, prior to him becoming Pope, as to how he encouraged and progressed, if you will, prayers to Mary. And in certain parts of, they don't touch on here, but in certain parts of South America, Latin America, and other parts of the world, Mary has been elevated to the point that she is what's referred to as co-redemptrix. I mean, she can redeem you just as well as Jesus can. It's kind of like, I don't like the way Keith looked at me, so I'm going to go tell his mommy on me. And that's exactly the way, it's that, I know that oversimplifies it, but that's kind of how it is. That Mom will go talk to Jesus. Jesus won't be so mean to you no more because he's a bully. And that's how it's viewed. I know that seems illogical and unbiblical, and it is unbiblical, and it is illogical. But Mary was never anything more than a peasant girl and the mother of Jesus on earth, and that was it.
Saint is really a human. Is it not an angel?
No, Paul refers to all believers as saints. But what the Catholic Church has done a lot of times, they've use that designation or that title for somebody who's done a spectacular ministry. Yeah, to elevate that person to a office, if you will. But yet, the Bible's pretty clear, we're all saints. And we get in the section here, it says, how close are we? All it would take would be for the rapture to happen and the world religions would unite rather quickly. Because as stubborn people, those that Jesus is the only way, because that's what he said, folks would be out of the way. And once we're out of the way, one world religion can come about rather quickly. They actually estimated it in here to take no more than weeks, maybe months, at one point, to unify everybody. I wanted to make sure we touched on a few of these organizations. The decree over on page 505. Remember what we read about the One World Government Manifesto last week? Well, here's the one from the religious organization called the URL, which is sole purpose is to unite the faiths, to have interfaith summits, to do what they can to bring all the religions together. Here's their manifesto, right from their handbook. We stand on the threshold of a new world order. Does that sound religious or governmental? That may be defined either by an increasing polarization that fuels a spiral of escalating conflict and violence. Okay, so they're saying we're going to keep standing our ground and we're all going to keep fighting and killing each other, or by growing a global cooperation that calls for a human race to work across national, ethnic, and religious boundaries to serve a larger global good. Sounds an awful lot like one world, new world order stuff, but this is coming from the religious side of things. They are, in particular, as we look back up the page, to cooperate closely with the UN and its political diplomats to influence social mandates and influence policy and support of its programs. Now, didn't we just read about the Babylonian harlot exercising influence over the one world governance? Isn't that exactly what we just read right here that this group is doing? They're influencing the UN on social mandates. Okay, maybe social mandates today. How far will it progress? According to the scripture we read at the beginning, it's going to progress to the point that the UN or the 10 kings get sick and tired of the influence of this group. And this group, of course, it would be the group that may not be this group that's listed in the book. It could be a different group, but it's still an organization, and it's still doing just what we read that the harlot would do. During the time of the tribulation, there will be massive bloodshed. Christians will be hunted down like dogs and slaughtered in the streets for sport. It will be one of the worst times to be a person of faith. It talks about this Babylonian harlot and how she is drunk with the blood of the saints and with the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. And we think drunk with it. She's not actually drinking the blood. You guys ever seen, like on the news, mob mass hysteria? Where one person starts something, somebody else gets involved, somebody else gets involved, somebody else gets involved, and it turns into a mob mentality. Well, this is what's going to happen. These one world governments, one world religion people are going to get excited and thrilled and just can't wait to find a Christian and kill them. It will be that sort of mob mentality. And if you guys have seen that, like on different newscasts and stuff like that, those people, while they may not be intoxicated, act as though they are intoxicated because they're being driven by a lust or a desire to do damage, to do harm, to tear things up. And that's exactly what these folks will be like when they start hunting down people of faith. And that's why it refers to them as being drunk, because they act as if they are drunk. That pretty much sums up what the one world religion and where it's going and where we're at today with it. And there are a lot of efforts right now that aren't public, bringing Christianity and Islam together and how they can find a common ground and how Christianity and Islam, the two largest religions in the world, could start working together. And, you know, it's a lot of this stuff that we're talking about is progressing rather rapidly. It just doesn't make the news all the time, so it's hard for us to see. You guys got any questions about one world religion?
But you know, like over there in Arab nations, those people aren't even trying to, you know, like there is people who are Christian. That's a death sentence.
Sure is.
And you talk about them trying to get together and meet, they don't intend to meet on common ground.
No, that's why those religions it's gonna be tumultuous, and like I said, it gets to the point where the government just shuts it down. When it talks about the 10 toasts and the 10 kingdoms, how they're partly iron and partly clay, it's gonna be like that besides just the government, it's gonna be like that for the world religious system, because you're gonna have people that still aren't gonna get together, and they're still not gonna work together. On the news is gonna tell you how awesome and great and how amazing the whole world is, but down on the streets, it's still going to be just conflict after conflict. Any other questions? All right, then we'll pick up where we're at next week. And we'll start the seal judgments.